All right, welcome everybody to another episode of Navigating the Intentional Life. I am Justin Copeland, the host and founder, and this morning is one that I'm very excited about. I know I say this a lot, but there are a few guys in my life that I look at and say, hey, when this man speaks, you listen, because he's lived life, not just from a stance of, he goes out and he does the things he wants to do, but because he puts himself out there with his foundations, his morals. He is first and foremost a man of Christ. He is a father. He is a husband. He is a leader in his community. He is a leader in his job. The man that I speak of is Jerry Adams, man of grit, men of grit. Jerry, good morning, buddy.
Morning, Justin. Man, we've been trying to get this thing together for a while. Finally got our schedules together, so I'm excited, man. I'm excited to sit here and talk.
Yeah, it's one of those things, like, we're both busy just doing the things that we're doing. And this is one that I've had kind of earmarked on the calendar since I started and got to follow you because you are a guy that, this is no fluff. This is no bullshit. I mean, I've had enough time with you in the cigar room and through social media, and obviously your involvement with FOE and Zach and Anthony, that you're a guy that people listen to, that they follow. And on the surface, that sounds super cliche. It sounds corny. I mean, there's a lot of people that will say that about different people. But as I was saying before we got online here, I mean, you're somebody that's cut from, a different cloth. I mean, there's not a lot of guys that will say, oh, I want to do this. And they can be passionate about it, but the work behind it isn't there.
Yeah.
And so really what I want to start to dive into, the biggest thing that we've kind of discussed is leadership.
Sure.
I know a lot of the people around you, from your work to different podcasts, the men that follow you, they go to you for that leadership, for that guidance, right? But tell me a little bit about kind of where that path for you started to take place, because it wasn't always just sunshine and rainbows.
Sure.
Right. So
anytime you go down a path, you are there are a series of mistakes that you make and you learn from them and you continue to progress. But for me, it all starts back when I grew up. I grew up in my parents bought a place that was a rundown place that needed to be rebuilt. It had been 200-year-old farmhouse. The farmers stored farm equipment in it. And, my brother and I, and my mom, we lived with my grandparents. My dad lived in a tent in Pennsylvania in the snow, and he decided he was going to remodel this thing. So they struggled with some financial things early on. And so we didn't have a whole lot of money. And, he got one room fixed, and we went there, we lived, had no running water, took baths in the creek. I always tell, my brother and I used to go visit a friend that lived a few miles away, and they had dirt floors, and we would walk away and we'd be like, man, those dudes are poor, man. Not realizing that, hey, to most people, we're poor too. And here we are taking baths in the creek. I'm taking a bath, and right next to me is the mini trap that we catch minis to go fishing with. So it's this is how we grew up. But to us, we didn't realize it. Like, it was an adventure, and it was that way a lot because of my dad. And so when we talk about leadership, my dad was really, really good at developing boys into men. And my brother and I, we got he's zeroed in on us. Obviously, that's where that started. And so we learned early on a bunch of lessons with my dad. Like I remember us, he would teach us how to work. And my dad had this thing, and he's like, when we were sweating and we were working hard, he'd be like, hey man, look at that. You got sweat coming off your face. And so it became this cool thing. It became this thing, like, you're not working until you're sweating. And he would take, like, he had this long-term vision. He would have my brother and I, like 6 and 8 years old, moving cinder blocks for the bigger cinder blocks, right, for him when we were doing a building project on the farm. And I think about that now, now that, you and I are fathers. Think about a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old moving your cinder blocks and you're standing there waiting for them. That project had to take 4 times longer. So the patience that he had, knowing that, hey, I'm building more than just this project, I'm building men. And so he had that foresight, he had that long-term vision. And so he would do things like that taught us, the value of hard work and a work ethic that helped us throughout life. Later we started to grow as we got older. My dad, I was wild, crazy. Once the testosterone started hitting in me, man, I was like pushing all the edges. And so, so I got myself into a few holes with teachers or coaches or, police officer every once in a while. But my dad never went on behalf of my brother and I. Like we had to go sit face to face, eyeball to eyeball, and work out our stuff. He coached us. Like he would tell us, hey, here's an approach. Here's something you want to think about. But we had to go there and we had to sit and we had to have the hard conversation. When a bully started picking on me, my dad wasn't going to the school and saying, you need to address this and all this he was teaching me, here's how you got to deal with a bully. And here's what you're going to have to do. And so I think about that in light of leadership. And there are many other lessons. These are just a few that come to mind, but I think about that in light of leadership. And what I found is, I work in the steel industry, and you got some pretty tough dudes in the steel industry. What we do is not easy to do. And it requires a certain breed, man. Not everybody's cut out to do it. And so you have issues that you need to address. And those kinds of guys, the only people they respect are the people that can sit down eyeball to eyeball and have that hard conversation. And you need to have that, and
it's crazy because I don't want to breeze past this part for anybody that listens, especially the guys that listen that might be dads or are on their way to being dads, because, you're 56 in October.
Yep.
I'm 40 right now. And I grew up in a time where, my dad wasn't one of those that necessarily just didn't talk to us and he was only a disciplinarian. I mean, there were often times that I had some, my dad was very transparent with me on certain topics, whether it was relationships, religion, work ethic was a big thing in our family. I grew up in a small town as well. And, we weren't dirt poor, but we were poor. My dad was trying to figure things out, came from a family ran store. My grandpa was, he came from the Depression era. He and his family, I mean, they tell the story of being out in California and living in a boxcar with 3 other families in a boxcar.
Wow.
So the reason I bring that up is because your dad came from an era where his dad probably was not, hey son, let me talk about how you're feeling.
Yeah.
Let me explain to you what it looks like to be a man, right? Because they were too busy worried about having food on the table.
Oh yeah.
And so your dad, he kind of broke the mold in, hey, we may not just sit down and have these big, long hugs and cries together, but he was giving you this value in his patience. Because I can think about it myself on projects like you're talking about with the cinder blocks. Like, shit, man, it's a Sunday. I got to work tomorrow. I got to get this done. And my sons are doing the best they can, but shit, it is slow. Like I'm ready to take a break or sit down or whatever. And here's your dad going, no. I see the bigger picture.
Yeah.
And that's something that you and I have talked about in different forms as far as kind of, I don't know that he necessarily had to break a generational curse.
Sure.
But in that vein, he probably did it much differently. And again, I don't know your grandfather. I don't want to speak ill of the man.
Sure.
But he was like, I've got to pour myself into my boys to make them the men that I believe that they can be. And what I wanted to get to with that is, Jerry, like we've had the conversations in the cigar room specifically back in April about kind of wounds of the father, generational curses. A lot of the guys in there, myself included, had, you know, some difficult relationships with their dads, but you didn't.
Yeah.
Right. And I know that you enjoy talking about your dad.
Yeah.
And that's something that's not something that's common, man.
I
And
know.
so tell me a little bit more about that relationship with your dad and how with you specifically, because I know you have a brother, how that really guided you, how that relationship, especially going into your teen years and young man years when you were kind of wilding out, how that continued to be a guiding force for you.
Yeah, he helped me through a lot of hard times. Like I said, you know, I can't imagine, you know, the knock at the door and there's the police officer and he's asking which one of your boys had the Jeep last night, you know, because, you know, so,
my kids.
yeah, you know, so, you know, and yet he had this, you know, he was just like, all right, boys, you got to face the music. You know, you want to play these games, then you got to face the music. And, you know, that was what I needed. But my dad was really good at understanding. He could read people really well, and he could understand right away what they needed. Like he knew the times that I needed encouragement, that I'm already beating myself up. Like he doesn't need to pile onto that.
Mm-hmm.
And then also he knew the other side of it. He knew the times when, you know, I had my head up my backside and he's like, hey, bud, you know, and he would bring out the hammer because he needed to get my attention because I was a blockhead. You know, I was hard-headed and I needed that. And I look back on it and yes, I did, because I was going down the wrong path and he needed to direct me in that way. But, you know, I tell people all the time, and I said this in his funeral, that, you know, and I told my dad this many times. In fact, after he passed, I found an old email that I sent to him where I said the same thing. You know, when I became a Christian about 26 years old, there were a couple things that kind of came together, but one of them was, you know, my grandfather on my mom's side. He was a real inspiration there. But, you know, I would tell my dad often, like, it was easy for me to understand God the Father in Scripture because of his example. You know, my dad was rough, man. He was rough around the edges. He was but I understood when I started reading about God and I started understanding, you know, his the love that he has for us and how that's demonstrated in action, you know, specifically in Christ. Like I saw that in my dad. Like my dad just, it wasn't his words and his actions aligned. And that was important. And it was very clear, you know, my dad's like, this is what it means to be a man. Like what you do reveals what you truly believe, not what you say. Everybody says, you know, you got people say things and anybody can say anything. But, you know, I tell my leaders in the mill all the time, you know, your people that work for you, they watch you because they want to see what you do, because what you do reveals your values. It reveals what you really believe. And so, you know, with my dad, you know, I saw that demonstrated love. I saw the protector. I saw, you know, that warrior inside him. I saw all these things. I saw, and that mix of all of that, and then someone who truly and genuinely cared about my well-being was here to help me through life, give me direction and guidance and all that. So when I saw that in the scripture about God, it was real easy for me to make that transition. And I think that's such an important point of fatherhood, Like we are developing, like in your case, in my case, we have sons. We are developing sons to go out into the world and as men, right? So there's a transition that's going to occur from they're under our protection, and then you go through those teen years, and that rebellion and everything is purposeful. Like they're getting out to go on their own now, right? And so they're pushing back because they want to be their own man, and we need to help them in that, take on that responsibility. But there's another transition that's happening too. When that little guy, when he's little, he looks to dad like he's like a God figure to him. Like he's Superman. Like my dad can beat up your dad and all this stuff, right? And so he's like Superman. But there's a transition that goes on. And the other side of fatherhood is we are demonstrating characteristics of God the Father. Why are we doing that? Because our desire for our sons is that they transition from the umbrella of their earthly father to the umbrella of their heavenly Father. Like that's where we want them to go, because we're only so good, right? We're only going to be, we're imperfect just like they are. And when they get to that certain age, they're going to see that. And then that's when we need to say, hey, son, listen to me. All this wisdom, or, if you hear any wisdom from me or anything like that from me, this is where it's coming from. So ultimately, I want you to continue to come back to me for coaching and all this kind of stuff. But ultimately, I want you to go to him for all that wisdom, because that's where I go for all that wisdom. So there's that transition of boy to manhood. And there's also that transition from, I'm the one that's helping you and directing you and everything, to you need to get from the perfect father. You need to make that transition. So that was something that, my dad, he struggled with his faith for a long time. At the end, he got it kind of sorted out and everything. And he was a thinker, and he always had faith in God, always told us all the time. We'd be hunting or something, don't forget to thank the good Lord and all that stuff. But that character was there.
Yeah.
So, it was an easy transition for my brother and I.
And I see that because I know you, and I think as guys start to get into the foundation that you've created, that your father's example was something that is something that flows through you in a consistent basis all the time, whether it's conscious or subconscious. I mean, looking at the sign behind you, Men of Grit. And I was thankful and felt honored that you shared with me the eulogy that you did for your father after he passed. And the thing, just beautifully written, obviously a ton of emotion and heartfelt in truth in that. But the grit aspect of it, as I'm reading this story that you're basically sharing through this eulogy, as far as how you felt about your dad, was that this was a guy that showed you the foundation of what it meant to be a man because of grit, determination. And grit applies to so many different things in our lives. Like, it takes grit to be in a marriage. It takes grit to lead your home. It takes grit to be a father. And when I look at the very first thing that you say about your dad, I hope to Jesus that the example that I've created and that I will continue to try to create for my boys has this outcome. And I'm going to share this if it's all right.
Yes, sir.
To me, he was my hero. He was my mentor and my example. That makes me emotional as a father, because there is nothing bigger than your sons being able to say, my dad is my hero, my role model. And for those guys in a time right now where I look at it and go, like, the shirt that I'm wearing right now is a mentality shirt. It's the 57% of dads are in the home. Yep. It's just in the home. I'm not saying they're doing a good job, but they're there.
Right.
And And when we look at this, your dad was a guy that came from an era where dads didn't have this, hey, you need to think about your son's feelings. It's okay if they emote. It's okay if they get frustrated, and you don't have to beat their ass because they do something stupid.
Mm-hmm.
He was a man ahead of his time.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
now, thankfully for us, we've got guys out there. We've got these intelligent academia people that are going, hey, look, here's the psychology of how you can make your son stronger, how you can make your daughter safer. He didn't have that. And by fucking God, excuse my French, but that's the stuff that we need. Guys like your dad right now that have set this example in this tone. And through that, he's got to be looking down on you right now going, I'm still proud of you.
Well, he, one of the inspirations of Men of Grit was when I came out of that time when he passed. So prior to him passing, he was struggling with cancer and he had a bunch of things going on. And I remember exactly where I was standing. I was on the phone with him and I was talking about, starting a blog and doing some things with Men of Grit and everything. And I remember him and he said, Jerry, that is absolutely needed. And you're the guy to do it. So I remember those words. So when he passed, that was like, okay, that legacy is handed over.
Mm-hmm.
It's time. He's not here anymore.
Right.
So I got to carry that torch, and it's not like a pressure thing. It's like an inspired thing. It's like I get to carry this torch because I absolutely understand that I am my situation, unfortunately, is the exception. My father and the way he raised me he was exceptional. He was an exceptional father. And I know enough to know that a lot of guys don't have that. And so, which is what drives me, because I just have a heart for men, man. I have a heart for guys that maybe they didn't have that, but maybe I can take some of the stuff that my dad did and, help other guys to solidify those things that are missing because they didn't have that. I can help them fill those gaps, man, and become stronger men. And that drives me. But the biggest thing, what you said, the biggest thing was, and this is the biggest thing for us, it's example.
Mm-hmm.
I tell guys all the time, be who you want your son to be. Be the man that you want your son to be. The number one thing that we can do as fathers is be good at being a good man.
Yeah.
Be good at being a good man. That's it, man. We that's the start of everything. Be the example, because that's what they're looking at. They're looking to you as that example. So I can say that my dad was my hero. And I say that when I spoke of him, I'm like, he was my John Wayne. He was my Clint Eastwood. He was all that stuff. But it was real. Like I saw him protect the family. He was a wild man. And yet it was always in light of protecting people he loved. But I saw him one night when a guy, we lived out in a crazy place. This hollow that we lived in was, there was a biker gang down there, and it was just, there were areas the police wouldn't come. And so my dad was just like, well, we got to handle our stuff. But I remember one night, a guy that ripped through the yard and, was all drunk, and he passed by our house a couple different times. It was out in the middle of nowhere. And I remember my dad standing out in the yard because, my brother and I were out there playing like we always did in the middle of the night, just running around, just doing our thing. We were just kind of wild and crazy. But I remember my dad standing out there, 12 gauge in one hand, cinder block in the other, just waiting for that dude to come rolling down through there again. He was the protector, man. And I saw him do those kinds of things all the time. And so, it's just, so I I saw that side of my dad too. Like, I understand, like when David prays to God about the protector, and he's like, bring the hammer down on his enemies and all that kind of stuff. And God put that in his word, man. Like, he's good with us praying like that, right?
Yeah.
Because it's the example that David gave. And so you see God as this protector. Well, that's easy for me to see, because my dad, man, like I said, he'd make me go take care of my own stuff. But when it came time where the family was in danger, he didn't look around for anybody else.
Right.
Like, he wasn't looking for somebody else to come and help him out. He was like, he didn't want that, because he was capable. He was a capable man. And I saw that growing up. So I was like, okay, I don't wait around for anybody.
Looking through the email that you sent me. So for those listening, typically when I have a guest on, I'll ask them, hey, can you send me, some bullet points of things that, maybe happened in your life that got you to where you're at now? Because a lot of the people that I speak with on this podcast are guys like you that are doing the thing, right? They've overcome a lot of their massive obstacles in their lives. And, the point of this is to see, for those listening, to see, like, look, you don't just wake up one day and these things are happening. You've got to fight your fights first, but to do that, you've got to make the realization that you've got to fight to fight. It's like your dad out in the yard with the 12 gauge and the cinder block going, look, man, I got family. You might be having a good damn time, but it's at the safety and potentially the detriment of the people that I'm responsible for. Yep. And what that leads me into, because I almost go, man, we need to just have a podcast about the stories with your dad at some point. But I'm reading through this and I'm like, baseball team, the fucking biker club, like, shit, this guy, just brass balls. But, we said at the start of the podcast, that you're first a man of God. And that's where Men of Grit that you've created is just strongly rooted in what you're giving the men there. But the thing that I want to touch on, Jerry, because this is not talked about enough, in my opinion, when it comes to faith and Christianity, you hit it on the head with the story with David. Stay with me on this, strap on. The church today is creating nothing but beta men. The church today is saying that we should be passive as men. We, in turn, almost going against the Bible in the sense of, like, we should be submissive to our wives, that we should be apologetic, and that violence or warring and defending our tribe and our home is wrong. Now, I don't want it to be misconstrued here. Like, I do believe that there's always a diplomatic way to handle most situations.
Sure.
But sometimes you just got to fuck some shit up to protect the people that you love. If your dad had to that night, that cinder block's probably going at the biker's head, going at the front wheel. He's putting them down first. And then when it's necessary, the 12 gauge is there just in case, because you never know.
It's a guarantee. It's a guarantee, because I've seen him in action. So it was like, there was no doubt that this was no show.
Right. Right. And I think that's again where our faith, because when we kind of spoke about this before, obviously offline, about, when I sit down with you, your ability to lead men as a former, coach for 10 years doing it professionally, I know the effort and the responsibility that it takes to lead people, right? To keep them passionate whenever they don't want to do it, right? There is a special kind of person that it takes to be able to do that. And you're firing on all cylinders. And so, but those things that you do as a leader, they have to come from a foundation that you firmly believe in, because when you lead, what you're essentially selling is yourself.
Yeah.
And then from there, it's the system that you create for these people to follow that you believe is going to be the best method for us to get the job done, whatever that job is, whether it's growth in ourselves as a coach, as you are, whether it's in the mill, right, to get that job done. And I'm not going to try to speak on that because I don't have a clue, but I don't know that I'm cut from that cloth, right? You put me in there, but I get a desk job. but like it takes so much effort and time. And I know for you, the faith is a huge pillar, if not the core element to your structure.
Oh yeah.
Tell me, I know that you didn't just come out of the womb going, I love God.
Yep.
You know,
Oh,
talk to me a bit about that journey, because I know it was rocky.
Yeah, I had, I had a couple things like that in my life, but so from probably about, 16 through 26, my parents went through a divorce, and I ran with a bunch of guys, and we were all cut from the same cloth. We were wild around the edges and always looking for excitement, and, young men excitement almost always leads to doing things outside the lines, right? So did a lot of that, and from 16 to 26. And so I found myself, unfortunately, very short marriage, about a year, and then that didn't work, and I obviously wasn't ready, my mindset, everything. And I found myself sitting in a house with no furniture. The only thing I had was a sleeping bag in the middle of the room, and my hunting and fishing stuff. And that was about it. And my Jeep. That was it. That's all I had. And the place echoed. And I tell people all the time, that echo was like my heart. Like, that place was empty, and that was like my heart. So I was partying, this kind of stuff, the thing that you do. I was working in a steel mill, working on shift, all that stuff, and was going at it hard. And one day I just sat there and I thought, man, what in the world am I doing? Where's this end up? Like, where do I end up here? And it instantly, my mind went back to a memory of when I was 14 years old. My grandfather on my mom's side, he was an incredibly strong Christian man. Like, he had faith in the Lord, and he also had this personality that just drew people to him. And, he ended up getting cancer. And when he got cancer, he came out of the doctor's office, and, the family was there because they knew something was going on. He came out, told him he had cancer and everything. Of course, everybody was upset, crying, all this. And I remember what he said was, hey, crying and everything. He said, if anybody should be crying, it should be me. He said, when this all ends up, I'm going on to be with my Lord. And he said, I can tell you one thing right now, when I get there, I'm not going to want to come back. He said, so if anybody should be crying, it should be me for you guys, because you got to stay here, and that's how he lived. And so I remember, because I was 14, I was just old enough to start to kind of see and understand what was going on. But I never saw him complain. I saw him, grunting and groaning because of pain and all this kind of stuff. And I could see that he was dying, but I never saw him complain. And my grandmother told me years later, she said the one time that he came close to complaining, he was in so much pain that he said, honey, I wish the Lord would just take me home tonight. And she said, that's as close as he got. But even when he was in the hospital, people wanted to be around him, and the nurses fought over, hey, I want to be over his room and all that kind of stuff, because they loved being around him. Even when he was in pain, he was joking around and all that kind of stuff. So I saw this man facing the thing that most people fear above everything else, death. But I saw him facing it in strength and courage. So fast forward, 26 years old, years later, that's what comes to my mind. And right away, I'm like, that's what I need. And I knew that was a relationship with Jesus Christ. So there was a Christian bookstore. This is just me. This is my personality. This is how I do things. So I saw that Christian bookstore. I rolled in there one day, never was in there. I don't remember where I got this idea, but I rolled in there. I saw this Bible. It was called a Life Application Bible. And I walked up to the lady at the counter and I said, that Bible up there? And she said, yeah. I said, that's what I want. This one? I said, yeah. Okay. So I bought that Bible. I went home and I started reading. And everybody's telling me, well, you should start in the book of John. You should start in Romans. You should start all these places that people, when you're just exploring the faith, they tell you to start in these books. And I'm like, nope, I'm starting in Genesis 1:1. So I started at the beginning and I started reading. And for days on end, weeks on end, every day I read that book from the beginning all the way through Revelation until I finished the whole thing.
Right.
And man, when I read it that time, I was like, this isn't like the Sunday school lessons as a little kid. Like these words are like jumping off the page at me. Like this is for me. Yeah. And my mom, she shared, Christ, and hey, when I was younger, we've all sinned and fall short of the glory of God. Our standard isn't each other. It's the glory. It's the perfection of God. If we want to be in the presence of God, we need to be perfect like him. And so you quickly recognize, if you're any kind of human being, you quickly recognize, I can't get there. Right. And so Christ was the answer. He came, lived that perfect life, went to the cross, died for our sins, rose again, so that if we place our faith in him, that we could go on and follow him in that path to eternal life. And because of the work that he did, he paid the price for us. And I understood that. And when I read that Bible, I was like looking at my life and looking at everything, and I'm like, I'm going to hell. Like there is no doubt.
Yeah.
100%. I earned every minute of it.
Yeah.
I'm going to hell.
Man, it's crazy because every guy you speak to, whether they're on the right path or they're in the shitstorm of their life in that moment, they have those seconds that like you're talking about, sitting in that house where your heart is just echoing through it. And it's a visual example of how you are inside.
Oh, yeah.
Every man has that moment where they say, this can't be it. This can't be where my life is gone.
Yep.
And I've got to do something, but that's the trick right there. That's where, unfortunately, not everybody gets it. Not every man gets it. He has that moment. And instead of going, hey, I'm going to do something, I'm taking action. I'm not 100% what that is. I'm not sure what that is, but I'm doing something, and I'm just going to take that first step. And, if we can't see what's happening here, we're talking about, the path that you had to go through from, you've had this example with your father growing up. He was obviously a man of massive grit and heart and belief. And you got to see that. You got to hear it. You got to see it. You got to feel it. You knew what that was. But then it became time for you to take on the world on your own. And at 26, you're sitting there by yourself. But now we start to turn to the faith. And what's building here is that life resume. Yeah. What's building here is that blueprint to what is going to be now at 2022, your ability to lead.
Yes.
Because to lead, you've got to have those moments where you're broken down. And the best leaders are going to be able to have that accountability, see that raw moment of, I'm in a home that's empty, like my spirit.
Oh, yeah.
I'm in a sleeping bag, which in a way I can shift that into, this is an example of the work that I put into my life so far. This is the example of the work that I put into my fucking character.
Yep.
I don't have anything to fill to then provide because I haven't done the work to get it.
I figured
not every man sees that.
Yeah. I figured at that time, well, dude, right now, the path you're on, you're going to be on the corner of a bar trying to be the life of the party. What a mission. What a mission. And then that's what
after that too. Yeah. That's bleak.
Yeah. Yeah. So
bleak.
Absolutely. So I went down that road, and, I tell people all the time that, I prayed to receive Christ. I asked Christ, I was like, Lord, you got to save me. And if I understand what's written in this book, you paid the price, which means I need to trust myself to you for there to be a transaction that occurs, that him and his work is now going to become mine personally, so that I can be made clean and pure, so that now I can have this relationship with this guy. And so I prayed for that to happen. And I tell people all the time, I prayed that like every day for weeks on end, because I wanted to make sure it stuck, because I knew this is what I needed. So that's where I became a Christian. And, I started just reading the Bible a lot. I went to Bible college, took some courses on my own just to learn how to teach. And because I realized not long after I became a Christian that God gifted me to teach and to lead. And so those two combined are coach, right? Teaching and leading. And that's how he gifted me. And, back to what you were talking about earlier, he gives me the strength, because we all know if you're going to lead, man, there's going to be times where you're going to be a man on an island. So you better have some kind of internal strength to walk that walk. And that's my internal strength. My internal strength comes from Christ and what he's done in me and what he does in me. So I have that power and that strength in me. And when I lean on him, I know that he's going to show up and give me the wisdom that I need to make the decisions I need to make, and to address the issues the right way, and to lead and inspire people. He works that out in me. He pulls what he's built into me. He helps me get that out to the world and do it in a way that's effective. And so that's where that faith ties up. Now, I will tell you that, I went through some times of complacency, and I went down a road that, even as a Christian, where I wasn't following him the way that I needed to. Career was going great, but home was not, and that's where I transitioned, and that's where I ended up coming into, years later, I ended up coming into FOE, and I realized that, if we really want to be effective as men, if we want to be good at being good men, we need to surround ourselves with other good men that are good at being good men, and that's you and I. This is how we connected. And this is how a lot of us connect, because we see each other striving down a path. And FOE was that for me. I was, even as a Christian, I was back and forth fighting with things like porn and things like that, and not being the leader in my home that I should be. Career was going great. It's funny how we as men, we can compartmentalize things, and yet these other things weren't lined up. And that brought me to another phase of life, which was, and eventually became Men of Grit. But then it was some hard work that needed to be done to fix a lot of that stuff. And now today, man, that, relationship with my wife, we're almost 30 years, man. And it's great. It's better than it was at the very beginning.
You hit it right on the head, because, I know you've had some time on some podcasts. So I love that you've just brought me into the segue that I wanted to make, because again, kind of step by step working through this process for you. I found it interesting. You said something, you're surrounding yourself with these men, right? And it's, FOE, obviously you mentioned we connected through this same want.
Yes.
But what I find most appealing, that really stepped off the page, so to speak, for me, and what you said was, the way you found FOE was you turned to the men in the Bible first.
Yeah.
Those stories.
Yep.
David, Abraham, right? John, Peter, right? All those stories were men that you're looking at, listening, taking it in. It's filling your heart now in ways that you're thinking differently than you did prior to that. And sidebar, I have to say respect to this too, because I have been in the church my entire life. My entire life has been wrapped around, thankfully, it's been wrapped around Christian faith, growing up in Southern Baptist churches. My grandfather was an amazing, he would be ordering McDonald's in the drive-through and be like, yeah, I'll take that Big Mac, some fries, I'll take a Diet Coke, maybe a Coca-Cola, because I got some peanuts here that I want to put into that Coke later. And by the way, do you know Jesus? Sir, your order is going to be $7. Yes, $7. Here you go. And have you heard of Jesus Christ? That was him all the time. It didn't matter, right? I'm pretty sure when he got diagnosed with some of the health issues that he had, it was like, sir, you're diabetic now. That's great. You know who wasn't a diabetic? Jesus. Do that, right? So I grew up in that, and not to go off on this tangent, but I have not one time, not once, have I ever read the Bible from Genesis 1:1 all the way through. I've read the Bible.
Yes.
But it to me, it's been always like starting a movie in the middle, then going back to the beginning, then to the end, and then everything in between. That's how I've always done it. So anyway, back on point. It's, you surround yourself with these men first in the word. Now that's starting to change your heart, right? That's starting to make you see the world differently, because you hit it perfectly with the fact that we as men, we value ourselves often through what we can earn.
Sure.
Through the work that we put into a job, right?
Yep.
Not necessarily a calling. I'm using these words specifically, a job.
Yeah. That's right.
Something we call a career. And if we don't, and everybody else values us the same way. What are you giving to me? What are you giving back? How nice is my car, right? How big is our house? What trips can we take or can we not take? It's constantly in our faces of how we're valued based on the paycheck that we earn. And so we do get lost in that too often. We do get caught up and trapped in that too often. And I say that to say this, it takes the right woman to not see that, to not care about that. And you've already mentioned it, 30 years married. Essentially, the lead-in is how faith helps you find your wife, and how faith and this structure that you've started to build has made that a 30-year marriage.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and that's I'm so grateful to have found, the guys in FOE. I knew that I needed something because I was going down the wrong road, man. And I tell people, here's what I felt like. I felt like I was standing in the middle of a railroad track and there's a locomotive bearing down on me behind. It's just a matter of time. Like if I continue to stay on this path is I'm standing on the railroad tracks. And eventually there's a locomotive going to come. And that's going to be it. This is leading to destruction. This is not going to be good. Right. And so I knew that you got to get this squared away. And so I got in with these guys, and, I started to kind of grow and understand, the foundation to everything we talked about earlier with fatherhood, but it's the same thing in your relationship with your wife. It's be good at being a good man. Like be good, be solid. One of the things my wife and we talked about one time, she mentioned, she said, she said, today you are good with yourself. Like, who you are, where you're going, and you're solid with yourself. Like nothing penetrates that. You know who you are. It's solid, right? And it wasn't always that way. I used to seek validation of other people, and the opinions of other people mattered too much to me. Expectations that others had, those were things that drove me. And I needed to square that all away in my mind. And when I got into FOE and got in with some guys that had been down a lot of those paths, they helped me. And they helped me see how do I fix this? What's the work that I need to do? And, way back from when my dad told me a long time ago, I would be, I remember I would be complaining about, I wasn't as big as the other guys, fast as the other guys, this, that, when I was playing sports or whatever. And my dad used to always tell me, he said, Jer, nobody will outwork you. Like you will work
Fucking
You
brilliant.
will work. And so, and I tell people all the time, I don't know if that was necessarily something that he saw in me, but he said it to me enough times that after a while I believed it and I became it. And so when I went into FOE, it was like, okay, here's all my junk. Here's where I'm all screwed up. I just laid it out there, and guys started to say, oh, I've been there. Let me show you how to do that. Oh, I've been there. Let me show you how to do that. So I get 3, 4, 5 different opinions of things I need to do. I zero in and say, okay. And now it's just do the work. And I'm like, okay, I got this foundation. You know, these guys help me, because the reality is it takes men to help men. That's what it takes. And today, a lot of men are going out there and speaking to these counselors, women counselors, trying to tell them how to be a good man. That it takes men. I don't care what anybody says. It takes men, good men, to help other men become good men. And so these guys, they kind of they pointed me in a direction. And then it just came down to, all right, it's time to do the work, you know, and that's where the grit came from, because that's the thing, you know, that's the thing that my dad told me. He's like, you will get on it and you won't give up. And because of that, you'll end up winning, because, you know, talent gets you so far. And some people are super talented and they can get them all the way, but that's rare.
Mm-hmm.
But man, the thing that, you know, my dad would tell me, he's like, you'll get on it and you'll start working and you'll keep working and you'll keep working and you'll keep working. And all these other guys, they'll just peel off one by one, and they'll wake up one day and guess what? You're still working. And because you work every day, you will be miles ahead of them.
Mm-hmm.
He was right. You know, he was right. And so that was it. It was, I had to experience enough pain that I was driven to do the work that was required to become a better man. And I think that's a lot of times what men are missing. They haven't had enough pain yet. And once they get enough pain, man, then they'll get serious about it, and then they'll really want it.
It's amazing what you're saying there, because it's true. When you look at, if you've raised a son, you know, genetically, it's just ingrained into us in our DNA that a lot of the times we have to learn through that suffering. You know, I got to break a bone to know, hey, this is what this is like, right? I got to do that stupid thing when, you know, it's always funny when I talk to parents that have boys and girls, and they talk about the vast difference in what it's like, because, you know, I've got a niece that's the same age as my youngest son and a little bit younger, but she doesn't do the same things. She's not as robust and loud and obnoxious, right? My boys are, I mean, shitstorm sometimes, man. Like, you got to watch out. That ball's rolling downhill and they ain't moving out of the way for nothing. And I'm proud of that.
Oh yeah.
I'm not gonna take that away. I'm gonna guide it. I'm gonna nurture it, because eventually they themselves are gonna be men that are gonna be leading other men, but then they're gonna be leading a home and leading the heart of a woman. And that's, you know, when we start talking about the relationships, what you're hitting on there, you know, as far as what your wife has said to you in these intimate conversations, is women want a man that they know that can protect and provide. And those two words, I mean, I think a lot of people get it wrong. A lot of guys get it wrong. Provision is, I'm giving the house, I'm giving the cars, I'm giving the trips. I've done my job. No, it's part of it. It's actually a small part of it. If you're with a good person, if you're with the right person, right?
Yep.
But where they miss it is that other side of that providing is emotional, that providing is spiritual, right? And then the physical. And so often, myself included, because I have a failed marriage behind me as well, I wasn't ready to lead as a man. I wasn't ready to protect her heart. I wasn't ready to step up to that call, because my head was in the other areas of life of what's my career look like, right? How many guys have you heard say, well, my marriage fell apart, but I can't believe she's leaving me now, or that she cheated on me because I was working 80 hours a week, busting my ass. There it is, buddy.
Yeah, you weren't there, man. You
There
weren't
it
there.
is.
You couldn't provide the strength that she needed. She needed a strong man
No,
that she could lean into.
these women don't want these soft beta males. I don't care what is put out there.
Oh yeah.
You look at these women that say,
Right.
"Oh, I'm so independent," and men are dumb, and that's what's being sold to our young boys in movies and TV shows. The men are always the ones fumbling it around, and the women are coming in to clean it up. Bull fucking shit. I'm not taking away from women's abilities by any stretch of the imagination, but a lot of these Karens out there that are so strong and independent, you break it down to the core and you watch enough and you pay attention. They are the most bitter, angry women because they're fighting genetics.
Yeah.
They're fighting thousands of years of what it's meant to be. And men are doing the same damn thing.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
They're doing the same thing.
They're not being who they were created to be. And that's key, man. You know, I mean, and I tell people all the time, you know, you see that in Christ. You see a man's man. It's just not being conveyed in today's Christian world very often. But, you know, how many men can go out into the wild for 40 days alone? I'm not even talking about fasting, and I'm not even talking about spiritual warfare and all the stuff that happened when Jesus went out into the desert. I'm just talking about how many men today can go out into the wild for 40 days straight, even with modern gear. Like, I backpack in the Rocky Mountains with my son.
Yeah.
So I know what that's like. And brother, I'm going to tell you, after a week, he and I could sit at the drive-through at McDonald's and eat about 15 hamburgers. And you know, I don't eat at McDonald's, but I come out of the wild after a 1 week of backpacking. He and I hammer down, man. We get milkshakes and all the stuff that I don't normally eat.
Yeah.
And we hog out. Why is that? Because that's hard. Now do it for 40 days without any of that stuff. And tell me what kind of man could do that. And tell me how many men today could do that. Not very many. And then tell me what kind of man was Jesus.
Not that hippie that they portray him as.
Oh, he's not.
No.
And what kind of men go into their enemy's territory and call them out face to face? How many men have the balls to do that with no backup? Just go in there by yourself, right? And your disciples are back behind you saying, hey man, you know, you're offending them. So they're not backing him up. So he's in there on his own and he's hammered down, man. Y'all are misleading people. You're instead of drawing them to God, you're creating barriers to them coming to God. And that made him angry, and he directly impacted that. What kind of man can confront those kinds of things with the most powerful people in his society and go head to head with them? One man against many men that are educated. And what kind of man does it take? You know, and then tell me Jesus was a wimp. That's not the Jesus I follow, you know? And so these are the things that we need to talk about when we talk about the Christian faith. We talk about strong men, but we can get into that some other time, brother. But
no,
there's a lot to be said there. There's a lot to be said there.
And I will say that's something that you're right, we don't talk about enough. But here's my simple answer to that question, because it is complex. But the reason men in history that have these names that you listen to, that you know, that we follow, the reason you know those is because they had a value system that they were unwavering from. They had a belief system that they literally would die for and did die for. And that's why those men could stand in front of this massive wall of you know, whether it was tyranny, whether it was this threat of, you know, persecution. They could do that because they said, no, this is my system.
Oh yeah.
This is what I do. And I will literally die for it. And so to answer that question, as far as today goes, where are our value systems?
Sure.
we're being told, no, just your truth is your truth, and just be whoever you decide to be today, tomorrow. It can change. It doesn't matter. You can pretend you're a dog. You can pretend you're a woman. You can pretend you're a man. God isn't real, but I can pretend I'm actually a dog. And that's what they're teaching our kids.
Yeah.
And so are we getting better or are we getting worse? Are we further removed from the kind of guys that can do what you're talking about, or are we getting further away from that? I'm going to tell you, my belief is that we're getting further away from it. And that's why, this last weekend in the cigar room, I said, hey, challenge yourselves. Because right now I can talk to you. And like I said, at the start of this, before we started recording the podcast, is I know you and I, we value the same things. I'm learning from you, and I'm taking those feathers that you're providing me to put them in my own cap and continue my mission forward in my way and what I believe is right for my value system. But we're kind of right there.
Sure.
The challenge isn't in these conversations with you and me. I mean, yeah, we grow and we learn, and the people that are probably listening are trying to figure it out themselves. But the challenge was, talk to those people, find someone that doesn't agree, that believes it's okay to be a furry, that believes that a man can actually be a woman even though he's got a penis, and talk to them. That's where the battlefield's at. And I'm not saying go out and create this division. No. It's the exact opposite. Go out and try to find unity in it. Try to spread a message that is your belief system.
Sure.
That's how we stand up. Otherwise, we're playing it safe. This is safe right here, Jerry.
Right.
And that's where my heart's at, is like, yeah, I want to continue to build my circle. I want to have this army around me. When I go out to give my mission, to give my message, I've got backing.
Yeah.
But you look at, we don't have that. There's examples of it throughout, Uvalde here in Texas. Those guys waited.
Yes.
They waited. They had everything they needed to. Your fucking mission was to make sure that kind of stuff doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And they waited.
Sure.
And people died for it.
Yep.
And that's a literal sense of men not having a value system where people are dying from it. From a metaphorical standpoint, in our situation now, is we are losing our men because guys aren't standing up. Because men
you think about
the system.
You think about what you said about changing values and all that kind of stuff. The world is aching for men that know where they stand and stand strong. The world's aching for that. It's aching for men that have a set of values, and they stand on those values. They know what they believe, they know who they are, they know where they're going, they have a mission, and they are strong men.
Yeah.
Strong in body, mind, and spirit. And those three things intertwine with each other. And that's what we need. And I think, in a sense, all the stuff that we're doing and the interaction, you start a cigar room, we got things going on. We have things where we are getting that message out, speaking truth, getting that message out. This is our fight. And so you can sit and we can talk about things, and people can complain about stuff and everything. But hey, man, I'm gonna write Bibles for men. I'm going to reach out to guys. I get guys come into my Bible studies and things like that. They don't know. Some of them don't know anything about Christianity. They've never read the Bible. And they're like, hey, this seems kind of interesting, but I've never done anything like, so what? Come on, man. Come on. Can you read? Yeah. Okay. Come on. We're good, and this is just guys. And hey, man, I might smoke a cigar every once in a while. I'm going to be drinking some coffee. We're going to read the word. We're going to pray together. We're going to become strong men together. So come on. You just want to explore a little bit? Let's go. So these are the things. We just keep pushing these things out, man. And more guys are going to buy in, because people are yearning for strength, because it's not as evident. It's not, it's the very thing my dad said. He's like, Jerry, you need to do this. That's what he told me. That's what I remember. Jerry, you need to do this, and you're the guy to do it. Go do it.
Absolutely. And that's where I kind of want to go, as we're wrapping up, because I know this is a multi-podcast kind of situation on these topics, because you're 100% spot on. These are things that have to be discussed. They have to be put out there. And I know you and I both are very willing, with our shoulders set, to be able to stand in front of it, to provide it to people. But what I want to do is give you an opportunity, because it's important to me that you can talk to directly, maybe people that don't know who you are, that listen to this podcast. One, where they find you, but, tell us about Men of Grit, where that's been going. And then when I put this out, I'm going to put all the links for everybody, so you don't necessarily do that. I'll put that there, but give us an overview on Men of Grit and where you're going and the mission with that.
Yeah, my personal mission is to honor God, to be true to the man in the mirror, and to be a rock for those around me. It's very simple. It's easy for me to remember. That's what I'm here in life. That's what I'm doing. And I believe building that foundation is, strength in body, mind, and spirit. So every day I look in the mirror, I see a guy in that mirror, and I'm like, okay, what am I going to do to make that guy a little bit stronger than the guy yesterday in body, mind, and spirit? I start working out. I get my nose in the book. I pray, do something for mindset. I'll listen to things. I do a lot of reading of especially for historical men. Right now I'm reading a big series on Theodore Roosevelt, that kind of stuff. But I believe that with Men of Grit, I believe that I've fought a lot of battles that men fight. I fought battles. I said, had this in and out thing with porn, and I needed to fight and kill that thing. My relationship with my wife, I need to learn how to be a solid man that wasn't influenced by outside influences. Be good at being a good man for my son, the example, and all that kind of stuff that I saw in my father. I needed to do all that kind of stuff. And so for me, it always starts with, if you're going to lead an effort, which is what Men of Grit is, if you're going to lead the effort, you need to be that first. And only when you have done the work yourself are you qualified to share that for somebody else. That's been my mindset, right? It was like, and I'm not saying that I'm there. I'm not there. I'm a man in process. Okay. But I'm a guy that has done the work. Like, I didn't wake up like this. This has been a process, and I'm in that process, and I'm becoming a better man, and I'm hanging out with good men, and I'm learning more and more every day. So I'm in that process. My heart aches for other men. I want men to experience the type of relationship I have with my wife. I want men to experience the type of relationship I have with my son. I want men to learn the lessons that I learned from my father when maybe they didn't have a great father. And that's what Men of Grit's all about. It's and the grit piece is because I believe that if you put the work in, you don't have to have all the talent. You don't have to come from the right stock. You don't have to have all that stuff, man. That's a bunch of bullshit.
Yeah.
All you got to do is identify the areas that you need to become a stronger man and do the work. That's right. And if you stick to it consistently, you'll become a better man, and you will see that there's a life that God created you for as a man. And when you start living it, it's not easy, but it's better. And that's my heart, man. That's what I want for other men. I'm like, man, once you experience that, you'll be driven to stay in it, because you certainly don't want to go back to where you were.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love watching the process unfold. I know when I first started following you, things have changed for you. The process has changed for you.
Oh yeah.
It's growing. That work is showing. With Men of Grit, it's right there behind you: strength, results, and victory. And I see all three, right? And that's something that drives me, that motivates me. And, you know, one of the themes in this podcast that we're talking about, if you guys are the guys that are listening, catch this. We're talking about finding good men around you to help you be a better man. And there's not enough talk. I don't feel about how guys can find this. You know, we've said several things. The Fraternity of Excellence with Zach Small.
Yep.
Jerry, you've been part of it. Anthony Migliorino, he's a part of it, right?
Anthony and Zach run that. Yep.
Yeah. So there's an amazing outlet that's been happening for a while now. The Cigar Room that I started back in December of 21. You know, it's a group for guys to come together via Zoom. There's no pressure. But it's opportunity to get involved with guys like Jerry, like myself, and these other men that are really challenging the fringes of society, the fringes of themselves to become better. Yep. And we're transparent and we speak on these things. Same thing with Fraternity of Excellence. Same thing with Men of Grit. It's an opportunity to dive into a foundation and a belief system that, as it did for you, Jerry, changes your life.
You bet. And
gives you that framework to start to build. You know, we always talk about, you know, you don't frame a house until you've leveled the dirt, right? Can't lay a foundation unless it is. So not a healthy one, right? So that is what I see in Men of Grit. That is something that I'm so proud to call you a brother, to be able to speak with you on the podcast today. So obviously, just right out the gate, thank you so much for taking the time. I know you're busy. I know you got a lot going on, and I appreciate you, man. As we said, you know, this is something that this is definitely not the last one. It's the first of many, I feel. And so to wrap up again, Jerry, thank you. For you guys listening, I will be posting where you can find Jerry, where you can find the Men of Grit, where you can find the Cigar Room, where you can find Fraternity of Excellence, and these guys that we've spoke on. And do us a favor. If you've listened to this and you found it insightful, you're still here at this point in the conversation, follow, subscribe, and share. And I don't just mean the clicks on the screen. I mean, you have a duty. If you know that you have a brother, a friend that's a husband, a friend that's struggling somewhere, that's a man, and he needs to find that help, and you go, this might be for him, send him our way. He can message Jerry directly. He can message me directly, and we'll do our best to try to do whatever we can to help that out. So that's my call to action for you guys that listen. If you're still here, don't let yourself down. Don't let your friends down. Continue the message for us so we can continue to do this. This is Navigating the Intentional Life. I'm Justin Copeland. You guys stay well. Thank you.